Aoto struggles back to consciousness, desperate to understand where he is. A voice cuts through the haze and asks if he is finally awake. He sees a mysterious girl with silver hair and pale skin, so unreal he can barely believe she is human. The girl proudly compares herself to a mythical goddess, then bluntly reveals that she actually is one. When Aoto reacts in shock, she casually remarks that almost everyone reacts the same way. Aoto realizes she somehow knows what he is thinking, and she coldly says it is only because his thoughts are foolish, pathetic, and embarrassingly easy to read. Thrown by her bizarre attitude, he can only admit that he has no idea what this self-proclaimed goddess is talking about. Aoto cuts her off and demands to know what happened to him. She answers instantly that he died in a foolish, pathetic, and miserable way, leaving him stunned by her sheer cruelty. Aoto right away denies ever doing anything reckless, but the goddess calmly reminds him that he had been treating everything like a game. Aoto recalls the latest VR game, Cloth Outsaber, and realizes with a jolt that it was a questionable game. He explains that he became obsessed with a girl there, gathered information, trained for their meeting, and challenged a boss named Blackshell, all while wondering if he had wandered beyond the player's area. As the memory locks into place, the goddess confirms that he slammed into a wall and died on the spot. She presses him to remember what he looked like right before dying, and his confusion only deepens. The goddess bluntly reveals that he was found in a deeply humiliating state, and even his family and relatives were ashamed at the funeral, leaving Aoto horrified. Crushed by the humiliation, Aoto says he is disgusted with himself and wants to disappear. But the goddess icily reminds him that he is already dead. She finally introduces herself as the goddess Ina, claiming it is her job to save people with miserable lives like his, while Aoto is left exasperated by her attitude. Ina declares that she intends to reincarnate Aoto into the world of that game, and he can only stare at her in disbelief. Aoto asks if she really means the world of Cloth Outsaber, and she calmly confirms it. After thinking it over, Aoto admits that if her story is true, then her offer is strangely irresistible, and he asks what kind of power she can give him. Aoto recalls that the game had not even been officially released yet, but he illegally got it and became so absorbed in playing that he even forgot to eat dinner. He remembers that he was supposed to be one of the best players in the world. He thinks that if he really could be reincarnated into that world, he would be able to do whatever he wanted there. Aoto asks what kind of power she means, and Ina explains that she will tailor everything to his preferred playstyle, including specialized stats and skills. Ina adds that if he wants to be the strongest swordsman, she can give him sword skills, and if he wants to be extremely wealthy, she can grant business-related abilities too, which leaves Aoto reassured. After hearing that, Aoto quickly decides that he will accept reincarnation. He asks to be reborn as a character who specializes in taming. Ina right away agrees and says she will begin by setting up his stats and skills. As she works, she explains that taming means winning over enemies and turning them into personal servants, stressing that this is not just a side feature, but one of the most important systems in the game. Ina further explains that in Cloth Outsaber, every character has unique parameters, including a category called Special Techniques and EP. Ina explains that the Special Technique is a risky system tied to confrontational situations, and warns that if an enemy pushes a girl into an extreme state, her EP value will be affected. She adds that if Aoto can overwhelm the target and make her give in, he can take control of her. Ina states that once taming succeeds and the target accepts his will, that person will automatically become his ally. As Aoto checks his current status, Ina tells him she has raised that questionable special technique to the maximum level to match his taming ability. Aoto is startled by the skill listed on his status screen, and Ina exclaims that it is a super rare ability available only to those with taming powers. Ina cheerfully explains that this ability lets him destroy all of an opponent's weapons and gear in a single strike without fail, and adds that it shatters armor instantly while leaving them otherwise unharmed. Aoto admits the ability sounds useful, but he quickly points out that he would be defenseless while trying to remove an enemy's equipment, and that a heavily armed opponent would never just let him do it. He then asks Ina whether the skill can be used with his bare hands, and she confirms that it can. Ina demonstrates the activation method, telling him to stretch out his fingers and slash as if using a sword, while Aoto shouts the name Cloth Outsaber. The skill activates instantly, and in the very next moment the situation turns painfully awkward. Aoto casually says he was only testing the skill, while Ina panics and demands to know what he is doing before awkwardly accepting his explanation. Ina protests that he never told her he would use it on her, making it obvious she feels blindsided and shaken. Aoto moves in and tells her not to overreact because he plans to use that other technique next, driving the tension even higher. Ina, flustered and cornered, says it would never have come to this if he had not intended to ignore her wishes. Under the rising pressure, Ina blurts out a desperate request for him to stop, making the scene even more uncomfortable. Aoto smiles and says she should not stop now, then tells her he cannot understand unless she says it clearly. Ina struggles through her embarrassment as she asks what exactly he wants her to do and with whom, but Aoto warns that if she cannot say it, this is the end. Faced with his ultimatum, Ina freezes and trembles in shock, unable to withstand the pressure. Once she finally forces herself to say it, Aoto reacts with disgust and says she creeped him out, while Ina snaps that he is the worst after everything she did just to say it. Left shaken and humiliated, Ina bitterly thinks that seeing her secretary act like this really makes him seem like some kind of ruthless conqueror. Aoto thinks that making this woman say those humiliating things fills him with a strange sense of control. Leaning over her, Aoto coldly agrees and says he will grant this greedy woman what she supposedly wants most, making the atmosphere even more unsettling. He then bluntly admits that, in truth, he does not think he can stay calm any longer, and the tension spikes. Overwhelmed and flushed, Ina looks up at him and addresses him with reverence, clearly rattled by how far the moment has gone. Ina breaks down in frustration, crying that after all the embarrassing things he made her do, she cannot understand why nothing has changed, while Aoto panics and insists there must be some mistake. Ina lashes out and asks if he has some kind of problem, and Aoto angrily warns that he might smack her. She desperately concludes that as long as he remains the way he is now, even if she can reach him, her goal will never work, leaving Aoto stunned. Aoto flatly says this must be the end and tells her to deal with whatever is wrong with her by herself, while Ina is left reeling in disbelief. In desperation, Ina pleads for him to restore her right away, and Aoto unexpectedly blurts out that he feels the same unstable urge too. As the moment grows tense again, Ina shuts her eyes and says she will endure it. In the vision, the woman gently says that once he grows up, she will come meet him, and the man replies that no matter how many years it takes, if she is fine with it, then he is too. She offers him her blessings for his new life, and he understands that this is a farewell meant to send him forward. The scene shifts as excited voices announce that he has finally arrived and that a child has been born. Through the haze, he hears someone called Selma being told she did well, that it is their son, while he realizes he can hear voices around him. As he is held in a mother's arms, the parents lovingly speak about seeing their baby boy's face and confirm that they have already chosen his name, while he is stunned by the realization that he has been reincarnated. The father declares that since the baby is a boy, his name is Vane, and the child quietly accepts that these two are now his parents and hopes to thank them once he can speak. The newborn embraces the name Vane Linos and resolves that, from this moment on, he will take his first step into a new life in this world. All of a sudden, a harsh warning cuts through the moment as someone insists that the child must not be allowed to live. A hooded elder holding a crystal appears with a grim presence and claims that, according to a prophecy, the child will bring chaos and disaster to the world, while Aoto's shocked perspective demands to know what that means. Faced with the absurd accusation, he protests internally that this world is built like a medieval fantasy setting, so talk of science should not even apply, and fears he is about to be executed. The adults decide they cannot kill the child, so they choose to lock him in the underground basement instead, believing their entire village will be cursed if he is left alive. As someone desperately begs for the child to be returned, Vane panics inside and realizes he still cannot do anything because he is only a baby. His thoughts spiral as he concludes this fate is even worse than his previous life, and he desperately wishes Ina would come save him at once. Time races by in confinement, and as marks are carved into the wall, he bitterly wonders when he last even screamed. By the time he reaches 18 years old, Vane sits in silence, worn down by endless years of isolation. Even after all that time, he reflects that Ina still has not come for him. At last, Anna all of a sudden appears before him, cheerfully announcing that she came to meet him just as she promised, and proudly identifying herself to the stunned Vane. Ina reminds him that she promised to meet him once he grew up, and the moment instantly turns deeply awkward as she urges him to continue from where things were left off. He jolts awake and realizes the encounter was only a dream. Regaining himself, Vane explains that Ina's proposal led to his reincarnation and gave him a cheat-like power. Yet instead of enjoying this new life, he was thrown into a dungeon right after birth, spent 18 years unable to step outside, and now can only wonder what is happening beyond it. Vane presses a hand to the barred door and bitterly reflects that, unlike his former life, where he shut himself in by choice, this time he has been locked away by force and can only wonder what kind of fate this is. He realizes the only things he knows are the village name, that his parents were killed, and that the diviner who had him imprisoned has disappeared. After feeling around the barrier, he concludes with frustration that escaping from this place is almost impossible. He recalls how he shoved the gate nearly every day without success, and scolds himself for not asking for enough strength to smash these walls apart with his own fists. Even while thinking Ina could easily save him if she helped, he right away doubts it, convinced her careless personality probably made her forget that promise almost instantly. He tightens up, tells himself there is no point complaining, and decides he can at least use the time to work on muscle training. As he exercises, he notes that doing this earns him experience points, making the effort unexpectedly useful. A sudden jolt throws him off balance, and he reacts in shock as the room abruptly shakes. Startled and aching, he wonders if that violent tremor was an earthquake. As the rumbling continues, he freezes and stares ahead in disbelief, realizing the disturbance is coming from outside. Vane studies the situation and concludes that the village raiders would have killed him outright instead of setting a trap. Even without understanding what is happening, he decides to seize this chance. A horned girl appears and coldly warns him once more to leave the village right away and go somewhere far away, saying that if he stays, she will not spare his life. As he stares at her, Vane notices her horns and realizes she must have caused the earthquake, though he also feels as if he has seen her somewhere before. Then it all of a sudden clicks, and in shock he recognizes her as Lakshal. He remembers that Lakshal was the powerful enemy he fought before dying, known as the Demon General Sword Dancer and the right hand of Demon Emperor Zerus. The girl confirms that she is indeed Lakshal, while Vane watches her warily. Lakshal turns the question back on him and asks who he is. Vane says he understands now and introduces himself as Vane Linos. With an awkward pause, Vane adds that he is just a villager, while reflecting that meeting Lakshal right after being freed feels like a cruel twist of fate. Vane instantly recognizes Lakshal as an overwhelmingly powerful enemy from his past life, someone he was never expected to defeat. He bitterly remembers how excited he once was to enter that world as himself, only to die in reality before he ever got the chance. Comparing their standings, Vane realizes the gap between him and Lakshal is impossibly vast, and a direct clash would mean certain death. After checking his skills, he knows at once that a fair fight was hopeless from the very start. Even so, Vane swears he will make Lakshal answer for what she did in his previous life and marks her as his very first target. Lakshal calmly answers that she has no need for a weapon because her own hands are more than enough. Puzzled, Lakshal asks what he means by a previous life, and Vane can only admit he has no real way to explain it. After hearing that, Lakshal simply accepts his words and says she will stop holding back if his fists truly are his weapons. Vane steadies his breathing and declares that he is her opponent, trusting in the attack patterns he remembers from his previous life. The moment Lakshal lunges forward with a charge, Vane commits to dodging the first strike and answering with a downward slash. Vane all of a sudden activates a skill called Cloth Out Saber. A system message flashes announcing that Lakshal has become embarrassed and that her confusion has reached the maximum level. As Lakshal cries out, Vane realizes the system message is tied to a skill he gained after reincarnating. Shaken and flustered, Lakshal panics over what just happened and demands to know what kind of person would do something like this. Vane admits without hesitation that he was the one who did it. Forcing an uneasy smile, Vane starts to explain, but Lakshal cuts him off and demands to know what motive he could possibly have. Vane notes inwardly that this skill creates an intensely awkward effect, and it is hitting even harder now that both of them are physically here. Lakshal is too overwhelmed by the humiliating situation to think clearly, and her composure keeps breaking down. Seizing that opening, Vane closes the gap and tells Lakshal to stand, thinking that the enemy he could never defeat is finally within reach. Seeing Lakshal dazed and distressed, Vane hesitates for a moment and wonders what he is even supposed to do next. As the draining effect lingers in the air, Vane lies back and declares that he will take Lakshal's power. The villagers stare in disbelief and ask if Vane is really the one who defeated that demon, unable to grasp what they are seeing. Vane coolly replies that it would change nothing even if he were, and someone right away shouts that Vane saved the village. As he unleashes a wide attack and sends someone staggering, Vane warns them not to misunderstand what is happening. While the others panic and ask how he can use magic, someone accuses him of causing their imprisonment through what happened and throws the blame onto Diviner. Vane snaps that he does not care, declares that they can no longer keep him locked up, warns that they will never hurt him again, and tells them to learn their place. One villager nervously calls out to the woman over there, and she timidly answers. Vane orders them to prepare clothes for two people, himself and Lakshal, and a villager anxiously asks if he is planning to leave the village. Vane coldly asks why he should care where they go, and whether they seriously think he owes them anything after spending 18 years imprisoned. Carrying Lakshal in his arms, Vane tells them to move aside so they can go wherever they want, and says he will do exactly that. After leaving the village, Vane washes in a lake while Lakshal sleeps nearby beneath a tree, and for a moment the quiet almost feels healing. The moment shifts into something neither can take back. He reflects that once they reached the lake, he checked his status and realized he could not absorb the boss's extra abilities. But the true value of his skill is taming defeated enemies and making their power his own. And even that alone brought enormous growth. Vayne thinks the 18 years of confinement were wasted, but decides that being able to tame Lakshal is still a powerful first step on the road ahead. Lakshal wakes in confusion, wonders where she is, and remembers that she had been attacking the human village. Vayne calmly greets her, says good morning, notes that she is finally awake, and makes it clear that he wants no trouble here. As Lakshal recognizes him as Vayne and remembers their fight, he simply confirms it. In shock, Lakshal realizes that Vayne defeated her and took her powers. Vayne explains that tamed beings normally do not become companions, but since she fully accepted him as a friend, he is sure she can no longer attack him, and he tells her to become his ally because she has no choice but to accept. As the weight of his words sinks in, Vayne waits for Lakshal's answer, while she can only stammer in overwhelmed confusion. Lakshal all of a sudden praises Vayne as an unexpectedly kind man, and he reacts with open confusion at how quickly she has accepted all of this. Lakshal says that after defeating her, Vayne could have killed her but instead wanted her as a comrade, and she calls that kindness. Vayne can only mutter that he never imagined she would take it that way. Lakshal insists she understands, saying that after being defeated by the one who stole her powers, she was given a chance to start over and serve him as a way to discipline herself. Eyes shining, Lakshal convinces herself that this must be some overwhelming act of mercy, while Vayne dryly notes that she is taking all of it far too positively. Lakshal raises her hand and passionately pledges herself to Vayne, declaring that she will obey whatever orders he gives, while Vayne is alarmed by how easily she gives up her loyalty. The air turns awkward when Lakshal all of a sudden urges him to do it right now, leaving Vayne confused about what she is even talking about. Leaning in close, Lakshal says she may not have experience but will do everything she can to support Vayne, and the exchange turns painfully uncomfortable as she begs him to tell her what he wants from her. Flustered, Vayne hurriedly calls out to Lakshal and says this is bad, realizing he has to stop this misunderstanding right away. As Lakshal urgently calls for Vayne to come over at once, he is left speechless and visibly drained by how far out of control things have become. Vayne points out that she keeps saying things in dangerously misleading ways, and Lakshal explains that she only meant she should return to her master, the demon emperor Zerus, report everything, and ask permission before coming back to Vayne. Lakshal reflects that if Zerus believes she is dead, then she may already be destroying towns across the world, and Vayne realizes she is talking about the demon emperor Zerus. Vayne tells Lakshal that, since Zerus is supposed to be her master, she should go back and meet that ruler, leaving her confused by him calling Zerus a man even as she agrees. Lakshal bluntly explains that Zerus is actually a petite and lovely woman, and Vayne is completely blindsided by that revelation. Lakshal adds that although many fear Zerus as a terrifying emperor, others say her true nature is that of a kind person, making Vayne rethink the image he had carried in his head. As Lakshal smiles to herself, Vayne is hit by the realization that many of his enemies in this world may be women, and the thought leaves him deeply unsettled. Vayne says he wants Lakshal to come with him, but depending on how things go, he and Zerus may have to fight, and Lakshal agrees instantly, leaving him startled by how casually she says it. Clinging to him excitedly, Lakshal says they should show Zerus what happened to her, while Vayne internally concludes that there is seriously something wrong with the way she thinks and finds her incredibly strange. When Lakshal all of a sudden says she can see it now, Vayne can only wait uneasily to hear what conclusion she has reached. The narration explains that after taming Lakshal, Vayne sets out with her towards Zerus's castle. As he carries Lakshal in his arms during the journey, Vayne listens while she describes Zerus's castle as a fortress-like stronghold with enormous walls ringed by mountains. Lakshal urges Vayne to lower their altitude right away, warning that if any demon sees them flying, it will become difficult to explain, and he agrees. After landing, Lakshal leads him onward and tells him this is the way. Vayne asks if she is really fine wearing those clothes, and Lakshal calmly says it is not a problem, but adds that what matters more is what they will say once they enter the castle. Vayne says he only needs to act like Lakshal's master, but she apologizes in a flustered voice and insists that, as someone who is supposed to be his servant, she cannot bring herself to do that, while he tells her it is fine. Lakshal says that once everything with Zerus is settled, she will accept any punishment and begs Vayne to punish her, making the moment painfully uncomfortable. As Vayne reacts uneasily, Lakshal nervously says that if he talks like that, she may misunderstand again, and he is left wondering what is wrong with her. Vayne reflects that after abruptly throwing Lakshal into such an overwhelming and inappropriate situation, he may be the one who made her spiral this far, then pushes forward and says they should go. Watching Lakshal smile to herself, Vayne realizes this is nothing like the personality she had in his previous life. Vayne admits to himself that Lakshal is loyal and dependable enough that he should be able to get along with her, just as she looks up at him and calls out to him. Lakshal happily says she is relieved that he seems safe. Lakshal thanks Lana, then urges Vayne not to worry because they are on their way to meet Zerus. As Vayne hesitates, Lakshal casually tries to introduce him, while Slana stares and bluntly suspects that he has been treating Lakshal improperly. Slana all of a sudden remembers something she had been wondering about and reacts in alarm. Vayne reflects that slimes can freely change form, which makes him wonder whether they even have nerves at all. Slana tearfully admits that she does not understand it herself and says everything feels overwhelmingly intense, making the moment deeply uncomfortable. Vayne realizes that because slimes can reshape themselves, their sensitivity and nerves must run throughout their entire bodies. Hearing that, Slana concludes in distress that her whole body must react the same way, and she accuses Vayne of saying something wildly inappropriate. Vayne hurriedly apologizes, insisting he never meant to upset her and only phrased it badly, but Slana cries that he took it way too far. Slana then offers Vayne a reward if he agrees to cooperate with her experiment. When Vayne asks what kind of reward she means, Slana excitedly says she will help improve him with her special method, and the atmosphere instantly turns highly uncomfortable. Vayne says he told her to guard the outer part of the castle and asks why she is already here, leaving her startled. Lakshal nervously explains that she had been stationed outside as the gatekeeper. Slana sternly warned Lakshal again that clinging to Vayne with improper intentions is not supposed to be part of her job. Growing openly irritated, Slana snaps that Lakshal should stop hanging on Vayne and disappear from her sight right away. Slana lashes out, and Lakshal cries that even she is being targeted as the blow lands. Vayne reacts in frustration, feeling they had been just one step away from a better outcome. As Lakshal all of a sudden presses close from behind, Vayne turns in confusion and calls out, asking why she did that. Lakshal blushes and apologizes to Vayne, admitting she had been foolish not to notice his distress sooner. She promises that this time she will help him calm down, and the moment turns dangerously awkward. Vayne stiffens in alarm as Lakshal earnestly asks him to trust her, making the atmosphere deeply uncomfortable. Vayne and Lakshal continue through the forest as a heavy, ominous presence begins closing in from ahead. Lakshal says they should not keep going that way, urging Vayne to head to Zerus's place and endure things until they can deal with Lakshal's main issue, while Vayne reacts in confusion and she claims she understands. Lakshal cheerfully says they will soon reach Zerus Sama's throne, and suggests Vayne. Sama may already be awake, while Vayne quietly takes it in. Lakshal says she hopes everything ends peacefully and insists Zerus Sama will be happy and bless their partnership, leaving Vayne awkwardly noting that he and Zerus Sama are only childhood friends. Lakshal eagerly confirms that ever since Zerus Sama was young, she has aimed to become the Demon Emperor, and as the one closest to her, Lakshal has continued serving her. As a grim image of battle and scattered weapons rises, the narration explains that the demon ruler values true strength above all else. Lakshal recalls those brutal days of constant battle with a fond smile, while the memory carries a darker undertone beneath it. Vayne quietly says he understands as he listens to her explanation. Vayne dryly remarks that it sounds like quite a bloody youth, answering Lakshal's past with uneasy humor. The scene becomes too charged to stay calm in. A giant demon blocks their path and openly confronts Lakshal, standing between her and Vayne. Lakshal coldly says they are going to see Zerus Sama and orders him not to interfere, while Vayne realizes this giant must be Gigai. Gigai refuses to move and declares that today Lakshal will lose her place. He all of a sudden lunges forward and demands that Lakshal surrender her position as Zerus Sama's right hand. As the giant closes in, Lakshal urgently tells Vayne to stay back because she will handle him herself. Vayne dryly notes that even among the Demon Emperor's followers, brutal struggles for rank never truly end. Realizing Lakshal cannot withstand the pressure after losing her abilities and skills, Vayne moves the instant she is blasted away. He throws himself forward and catches Lakshal in midair, shouting her name as she hurtles toward him. After catching her, Lakshal anxiously asks if he is all right, while both are unsettled by the sudden closeness. Vayne sets her down and tells Lakshal to leave everything to him because he intends to finish this fast. Vayne calls Gigai a brute and tells him not to interrupt his business with Lakshal. He blocks Gigai with one hand and flatly says they are in a hurry and have no time to waste on him. With a casual flick, Vayne tells Gigai to go to sleep and drops him in an instant. As Gigai crashes to the floor, Vayne coolly decides the brute should stay quiet now. Once the threat is gone, the mood turns chaotic as Slana clings to Vayne, says he saved her and gushes about him, while Vayne awkwardly insists he only wanted to test his power. Slana refuses to calm down, declares that Vayne is her savior, and says she is deeply grateful to serve such a wonderful master. While Slana happily imagines sharing that joy with Zerus, Vayne realizes that without stealing Lakshal's power, She could have crushed Gigai just as easily. As they move deeper into the castle, Slana excitedly tells Vayne that Zerus is waiting behind the next door, and he answers with wary agreement. Standing before the chamber, Slana happily announces that Zerus has returned, while Vayne steels himself for what comes next. Entering the room, Vayne apologizes for causing concern as he and Slana finally stand before Zerus. Zerus praises Slana for her work, but her expression hardens as she turns to Lakshal and demands to know what this situation means. After a brief pause, Vayne realizes that this imposing girl before him is the demon emperor Zerus. Vayne answers plainly that he likes Zerus, while the girl beside him cheerfully calls Zerus adorable. Lakshal passionately defends Zerus, insisting she is strong, admirable, and the only one worthy of the title of demon emperor. Zerus cuts through the praise and coldly asks what happened to the village Lakshal was supposed to handle. Slana all of a sudden notices she can no longer sense Lakshal's power, while Vayne calmly states that an enormous power is coming from him instead. Realizing their secret is out, Vayne admits they have been exposed, while Slana nervously calls out to him. Zerus angrily demands to know what Vayne did to Lakshal and warns that his answer will decide her response. As the tension spikes, Slana hurriedly steps in and begs Zerus to wait, saying she will explain everything. Before Vayne can answer, Slana clings to him and openly declares that she has chosen to serve Vayne, leaving him stunned and the room reeling. Slana bluntly reveals that after losing publicly to Vayne, Lakshal ended up in a deeply awkward situation, and adds that he also showed her a glimpse of the overwhelming power he holds. Lakshal insists that Vayne spared her life, and says his mercy moved her so deeply that she pledged herself to him. Lakshal proudly presents herself at Vayne's side, full of loyalty, while he stands there awkwardly. Vayne nervously confirms his name, while the small girl brushes off Lakshal's report as though none of it is false. The girl introduces herself and calmly says she understands, then asks whether Vayne will hear her request. Before he can even process it, Vayne is all of a sudden blasted back as the little girl erupts in fury and screams for him to die. She lashes out in outrage, accusing him of crossing a line and calling him a disgrace as her anger explodes. As Vayne and Lakshal dodge for safety, the girl declares that she will destroy him with her lightning. While crouched beside Lakshal, Vayne asks what is wrong with that strange little child, and Lakshal explains that Zerus is normally supposed to be gentle, making it clear this is nothing like what she described. Vayne argues that they should explain things properly because surely she will understand, but Lakshal urges him to leave this to her. Slana desperately begs Zerus to stop, trying to halt the attack before things spiral even further. Lakshal boldly insists she was not harmed at all and declares that Vayne treated her kindly, while calling Zerus a fool for failing to see it. Zerus fires back in disbelief, reminding Lakshal that she is her trusted aide, and demanding to know why she let herself be misled by a mere human. Lakshal says Zerus would not understand even if she explained, then admits she cannot stop herself from admiring Vayne for sparing her life. Enraged, Zerus declares that if that is the case, she will destroy Vayne to snap Lakshal out of this madness. Lakshal tells Vayne to stay back, but he calmly says he planned to fight first anyway. Lakshal anxiously asks how he plans to fight Zerus when her powers can strip away abilities and leave him helpless, and he grasps the danger at once. Vayne quickly concludes that he cannot let Zerus touch him or use Lakshal's powers, and decides he has to find another way to use his taming ability. As Zerus charges in, Vayne calls out and asks for her name. Zerus cuts him off instantly and coldly declares that it is already too late for him. Vayne notices strange threads around him and calls out in alarm. Lakshal urgently explains that Zerus inherited the blood of the thread user demon Alkeni, and Vayne reacts in surprise at the name. Zerus lets out a smug laugh, says that is correct, and warns Vayne that he is becoming her prey while telling him to stop pretending to be weak. Vayne quickly recalls that Alkeni is a half-human, half-spider creature, and realizes that means Zerus can produce threads from her fingertips. As Vayne starts rambling that a giant spider approaching a VR user might be unsettling enough to make someone quit, he awkwardly corrects himself and says opinions on demi-humans may differ, leaving Lakshal confused. Vayne casually decides to call Zerus Spider-Girl and asks if it fits, while Lakshal nervously admits she does not understand, but is sure the conversation is only making Zerus angrier. Furious, Zerus attacks at once, calls him a fool, and demands to know if he is mocking her lineage as Vayne is hurled back. After crashing to the ground, Vayne is warned by Lakshal to be careful. The magical effect on her grows harder to contain. Zerus launches another vicious threat attack, and Lakshal cries out to Vayne Sama in panic. Vayne winces in pain and angrily snaps that her attack actually hurt. He realizes her threat is so tough that even Lakshal's sword could not cut through it. Zerus declares that because of what he did to Lakshal, she will not let him die easily and will make him suffer first, while Lakshal remains shaken beside him. Vayne tells Lakshal to lend him her sword and move away from him at once. He unleashes enchant air and swings downward, sending a powerful force crashing into the ground. The spell takes hold in a way no one anticipated. Vayne calmly explains that Elkini's thread is an earth-based attribute, so he attached wind to the sword to exploit its weakness, then reminds Zerus that she was the one who promised to torment him to death. Smirking, he says that unfortunately he is too impatient to wait and will bring Zerus down right now. Zerus panics, calls his move nonsense, and tries to answer with lightning. But Zerus is too slow, and Vayne is already soaring through the air as the clash swings in his favor. Vayne rushes in with Arrow Wing and declares that this victory is his, leaving Zerus startled. He right away follows with Cloth Out Saber, and Zerus reacts in sudden shock as the moment turns deeply awkward. Vayne coolly wonders what that skill was, while Zerus looks down at herself in confusion. Zerus realizes she cannot feel any wounds on her body, and her confusion only deepens. She furiously accuses him of disgracing Lakshal and threatens that if he plans to humiliate her too, she will never forgive him and will kill him, while Vayne tells her to calm down. As the web-filled space closes in, Vayne remarks that now it is time to finish this. Zerus keeps shouting that after what he did to Lakshal, she will not forgive him if he intends to humiliate her too, while Vayne repeats that now the real fight begins. Vayne calls for calm for a moment while Zerus continues threatening to kill him. He checks a chat screen and sees abnormal conditions detected, with a warning that Zerus' stage rose to max, that the system is assessing her, that her condition is definitely bad, and that the damage from her attack will increase her battle drive above all other abilities. As Zerus' pressure sharply changes, Vayne tenses up, and she demands to know whether he has decided on his last words, while a note declares that this is his chance. Zerus insists he cannot defeat her, but he all of a sudden realizes her heavy armor and draconic power have already been stripped away. Vayne cheerfully notes that, just as expected, the unique technique worked in a single touch, and he declares that now they can finally settle this. Vayne calls Zerus reckless and says that after all her talk about dignity and the nastiness of his methods, she herself is being far too cruel. Zerus breaks down in humiliation as Vayne addresses her directly, while the narration explains that from her reaction the technique could be classified as a deeply uncomfortable move. Vayne casually says that if Zerus wants him to stop, she only needs to say it clearly. Furious and embarrassed, Zerus begs him to stop, and Vayne replies that he will let her go if she says those words. Zerus explodes in outrage, swearing she would never say such a thing even if it killed her, and Vayne dryly remarks that she really is a hopeless demon emperor. Vayne says he had expected a smarter response, but Zerus stubbornly insists that doing so would still be meaningless. As Zerus demands to be put down right away, Vayne lightly answers that he would have done that right away even without being told. Zerus calls out weakly while Vayne checks the system and sees that her critical state has ended, her EP has dropped to 0, all actions are now prohibited for her, and that he has successfully tamed Zerus, making her his friend. Vayne freezes in disbelief as Lakshal cries out to Zerus, and he can only react with stunned silence while realizing how terrible the situation looks. Vayne inwardly panics and wonders if he went too far, while Lakshal weakly calls for Zerus and trails off in distress. Lakshal excitedly praises what just happened as magnificent, and boldly declares that from now on, Zerus also belongs to Vayne as his servant. Lakshal insists that even if they leave the demon army, she and Zerus can still stay together as Vayne's servants, and Vayne is so disturbed that he pretends he never heard it. As Vayne activates a draining effect and checks Zerus' power, Lakshal looks up at him trustingly and calls to him. Vayne laughs at the demon emperor's power, something beyond human knowledge is finally in his hands, while Lakshal happily congratulates him. Holding Lakshal close, Vayne boasts that now no one can stand in his way, and Lakshal eagerly follows his lead. Zerus angrily interrupts and calls them fools, while Lakshal praises Vayne and the pair keep talking together. Zerus wakes on the ground and bitterly admits she can no longer use her power, while Vayne notes she is awake and declares that because she let him absorb her ability, she is now his servant too. Vayne smugly tells Zerus that at least she was still able to attack him before, but now he doubts she can act freely anymore, leaving her shocked and demanding to know what he means. Zerus demands to know why Vayne no longer obeys her, stunned that her command has all of a sudden lost its hold. Lakshal timidly calls out to Zerus, sounding as if she is about to reveal everything. Lakshal holds onto Zerus and insists that Zerus has also been swayed by Vayne, while Zerus furiously denies it and inwardly breaks down over how things reached this point. Zerus angrily demands how the second-in-command of the Demon Emperor's army could be swayed so easily by someone she sees as deeply suspect, while Vayne watches in silence. Lakshal admits she has found something more important to her than pride. Lakshal declares that feeling is devotion, with firm certainty in her voice. The weight of the moment becomes too much to handle. Zerus demands that Vayne return their powers if he can absorb them, but Vayne explains it is not that simple and adds that, strictly speaking, he can now redistribute absorbed abilities among his companions. Vayne coldly refuses to return Zerus her power, saying demonic beings obey only those who wield power. Zerus argues that the demon army follows her only because she controls it, insisting every demonic being out there obeys her for that reason. Zerus warns that if she loses her power, every demonic being under her control will break loose and rampage. Lakshal presses him, saying that would mean countless innocent humans would be slaughtered, but Vayne calmly answers that he does not care in the slightest. Lakshal reveals that she had been locked beneath the village for 18 years, from the moment she was born. Vayne says any hatred he once felt toward the humans of this world has long since faded, and now he feels no need to protect them. He adds that if Lakshal had not attacked the village, he would still be living in prison, and says he is actually grateful to her, while Lakshal instantly demands her power back and he flatly refuses. Vayne lets out a light laugh, leaving Lakshal stunned and Zerus visibly frustrated by how little he cares. Lakshal rushes to Vayne's side and vows that no matter what happens, she will always stand with him, while Zerus protests that a demonic being should not act that way. Lakshal proudly declares that, as a demonic being, she has chosen to become Vayne Sama's loyal servant, and Vayne admits her devotion is so extreme that it feels unsettling. Zerus spits that Lakshal's loyalty is as filthy as swamp mud, and Lakshal recoils in hurt disbelief at the insult. Vayne dryly remarks that Zerus's cruel words have deeply wounded him too, while Lakshal is left reeling from the attack. Lakshal all of a sudden asks Vayne to rely on her, and the moment turns awkward as he reacts in surprise. Lakshal moves close to Vayne and says she feels detached and that everything is fine now, while Zerus panics and shouts at her to stop acting like that. Zerus asks if Vayne plans to indulge her too, but Lakshal insists Zerus has always depended on her and now needs to learn independence, while Vayne and Lakshal remain in a tense standoff. Lakshal explains that because she has been Zerus's close friend since childhood, she is the only one Zerus can openly rely on, making Vayne wonder if that means Zerus has always used her as emotional support. Lakshal recalls that whenever Zerus faced trouble, she would bury her face in Lakshal's lap and cry that she was tired of being Demon Emperor and wanted to quit, leaving Vayne quietly stunned by the confession. Zerus angrily demands that Vayne return the power he took from her, but admits she does not feel strong enough to move, while Lakshal cuts in that the issue cannot wait. Lakshal warns that if the world truly becomes lawless, that chaos would interfere with Vayne's life here, and Vayne admits it would be annoying to deal with monsters everywhere, so he offers to return only a small amount of power. Zerus grimly decides to get it over with right away. Zerus reluctantly explains that to transfer the power back, she must make direct physical contact with Vayne, and bitterly admits that is the truth. Zerus quietly says that 20% of her original level, which would be 40, should be enough to complete the restoration. Vayne decides that is enough for now and says he should check his current abilities while they still have the chance. As he reviews his status, Vayne realizes he gained lightning, darkness, gravity magic, and auto-recovery from Zerus, and he also notices a strange skill called Mind's Eye that he assumes came from her. Vayne resolves to ask Zerus about that unfamiliar skill, but then something else all of a sudden catches his eye. He is shocked to discover one of his special skills has somehow risen beyond its previous limit, and he wonders if his abnormally high HP value triggered a change in the system. Lakshal excitedly calls for Vayne's attention and proudly announces that she has gained 30 levels, while Vayne notes that he has not even done anything to her directly. Looking at Lakshal's status, Vayne confirms that her level has indeed risen to 30, and the result leaves both of them impressed. Lakshal happily explains that the experience earned from defeating Zerus must have been shared with her as well, and Vayne quickly understands. Vayne pieces together that when an enemy is defeated through Tame, he receives abilities through Drain while the rest of the party gains experience, showing that Tame and Drain work in tandem. Filled with enthusiasm, Lakshal declares that the time has come to prove why she was called the Demon General of Sword Dancing, and she asks Vayne to watch as she now fights at his side. A beam of sunlight all of a sudden cuts through the roof, and while Vayne notes that the ceiling itself seems undamaged, Lakshal concludes they have a visitor. A woman addresses Vayne as the reincarnated soul and remarks that it has been a long time. Vayne is stunned as a goddess appears before him and cheerfully announces that his Ina has come to see him, making him realize she is the being responsible for his reincarnation. She excitedly says he looks very different now, while Vayne snaps back in confusion and demands to know why she all of a sudden appeared just to shout at him. Clinging to him, she marvels at how much he has grown and says she expected him to still be around 5 years old, while another voice questions whether someone like her can really do her job properly. Vayne dryly introduces himself as 18 years old now, and she cheerfully explains that time passes quickly for her because she lives forever, then brushes his reincarnation off as an unfortunate accident. Hearing that he is 18, she calls it extremely convenient and tries to resume their earlier behavior, making the moment instantly uncomfortable. As she says, thinking about him makes her emotional, a girl abruptly cuts in with a blade and forcefully interrupts the tense exchange. The newcomer demands that the goddess leave at once and declares that only she and Zerus are allowed near Vayne, while the goddess protests that a mere person should not pick a fight with her, and the smaller girl complains about being used as a shield. The pair explained that they knew Vayne before his reincarnation, and one of them boldly claims she gave him his troublesome skill while also revealing they had a complicated past connection, though she says it never fully developed. With a smug smile, the goddess politely asks them to step aside and then unleashes a lightning bolt, blasting the area as someone screams in shock. As the blast clears, the furious pair condemn Ina as a hopeless fool, while the taller one vows total destruction when she is done, leaving Vayne trapped in the middle of their fury. Ina hesitantly speaks up, and Vayne right away recognizes her voice, but the others insist they know no woman by that name as one of them angrily orders her to come out and threatens to capture her if she keeps hiding. Vayne stands with the two girls as Ina's faint voice asks whether all three of them can hear her. Vayne realizes it is Ina and notes that she seems unharmed, while the girls lash out at the unseen goddess for making them suffer through this, though one of them is too frightened to confront her directly. Since Ina seems to be sending some kind of divine message, Vayne bluntly tells her to stop being vague and just give them a task, while one girl admits she somehow ended up taming a major figure like the Demon Emperor and has no idea what to do next. Ina suggests that people who are reincarnated usually stand out after entering a school, and Vayne thinks that if studying there revolves around combat, it might actually be enjoyable. Turning to the others, Vayne questions what Ina even means, arguing that in their current situation there should be nothing left for him to learn at a human school. With a smug grin, Vayne jokes that he wants to enjoy a position of overwhelming superiority that would make others stare in envy, while Ina excitedly interprets it as a plan to build broad connections, and the smaller girl calls his thinking childish. Ina praises Vayne for already thinking ahead toward the future, and while he stays dry and unreadable, she happily thanks him for always interpreting everything she says in such a convenient way. Vayne then directly asks Ina what is going on, saying his special skill seems to have gone beyond its normal limit and that he needs an explanation. Ina lightly asks what he means, then wonders whether the real issue is whether it is all right. Vayne points at her head and bluntly asks whether it is all right for her not to have her horns. Ina proudly explains that any high-ranking demonic being can shapeshift, so she insists it is not a problem at all, while Vayne reminds her that she just said otherwise. Ina falters when Vayne points out that she has not even acquired wing magic yet, leaving her with only an awkward, uncertain reply. Vayne confirms her answer and reasons that if her level rose after the fight with Zerus, then she should now be able to redistribute her skill points. Vayne adds that he personally has not gained any skill points himself, which leaves him visibly puzzled. He lays out his conclusion that Drain directly raises ability levels, and because the experience needed keeps increasing to match that growth, he cannot level up normally before those requirements are met. Vayne admits that while Drain is useful, he suspects there is some hidden cost behind it and prepares to reveal what he believes is the truth. Ina says she had been thinking about learning some magic, explaining that demonic beings are generally skilled with it, so if she could do the same, she might be able to create a different kind of magic. Vayne agrees, and Ina notes that even mastering a single element is usually the limit, while using multiple attributes looks far more difficult. Ina explains that because she can use 3 different attributes, Zerus is a special case, while Vayne and the others react with mild surprise. Vayne points out that the player is not bound by that restriction, and Ina asks whether he does not find it strange that he could use magic before, despite still having his sword as well. Ina quietly says that if she cannot use wind magic, then she will have to stay close to him whenever they need to travel far, making the moment all of a sudden awkward for Vayne. Caught off guard by her cheerful agreement, Vayne awkwardly accepts it and admits that he guesses it is fine. As they walk through town, a girl all of a sudden demands to know what is going on, while another voice harshly calls Vayne a geezer and tells him to watch where he is going, leaving him confused as one girl insists she had only been walking normally. The accuser claims Vayne was walking so slowly that he hit her leg, then escalates the complaint by saying he came up and kicked her from behind. Bystanders start murmuring that the man sounds completely unreasonable and that he must be out of his mind. The crowd turns more hostile as someone asks whether Vayne has a problem with that, while another voice recoils in alarm. Vayne flatly says they have no reason to help the man and suggests they keep moving, while Ina right away backs Vayne and says the only thing that matters to her is him, prompting others to denounce them as troublemakers. A girl identifying herself as Siphon's guardian, Tamara Leonoa, dramatically appears and declares that she will not allow any injustice now that she is here. Tamara all of a sudden leaps into action and loudly declares that everyone should witness the power of her blade as she charges in. She announces it as Tamara's special move and throws herself forward with dramatic confidence. The spell changes her condition in an unexpected way. She quickly helps the old man up and tells him he is safe now, while Vane watches and admits she seems a little reckless, but still basically like a good person. The thug glares down at Tamara and angrily calls her a little brat, making the confrontation even sharper. Tamara keeps herself between the thug and the old man, while the thug erupts in anger and threatens to kill her with a magic bolt. Vane instantly intervenes and blocks the attack, leaving the thug charred and stunned as Tamara and the old man stare in shock and gratitude. Tamara looks up at Vane in surprise and asks who he is, while Ina watches at his side. Feeling the attention on him, Vane awkwardly mutters in response and realizes he had been careless. Vane introduces himself as Vane Linos and explains that he saw a girl being attacked and stepped in, then asks whether the old man and Tamara are unharmed, and they both say they are fine while Tamara adds her thanks. Tamara straightens herself and studies Vane with open curiosity after his introduction. The old man repeatedly expresses relief that the danger passed before anyone else was hurt. Ina stays close beside Vane, quietly pleased that he stepped in without hesitation. The nearby crowd begins to calm as the immediate threat is finally removed. A few onlookers whisper that Vane handled the thug with frightening ease. Tamara thanks Vane again and says his timing could not have been better. Vane brushes off the praise and says he only acted because the attack was right in front of him. The charred thug groans weakly on the ground, no longer in any state to keep fighting. People in the street start murmuring that Tamara and Vane make an unexpectedly strong pair. Vane remains wary of the attention gathering around them as the commotion slowly settles. Tamara right away calls him Vane, Kun, praises his magic, and eagerly asks if she may keep using the name, catching Vane completely off guard. Before he can recover, Tamara bombards him with questions. Whether he is an academy student, what magic he uses, and where he lives, while Vane tries to stop her. As Tamara politely introduces herself, Lakshal all of a sudden grabs onto Vane and bluntly declares herself his servant in a way that makes the situation tense at once. Tamara freezes in shock, while Vane realizes Lakshal has somehow made everything even worse as she keeps clinging to him without concern. Tamara asks Vane to explain, and he awkwardly admits he truly has no excuse for how any of this looks. Vane says that is exactly what he is trying to explain, but Tamara innocently fixates on the unfamiliar word and asks what it means. While Lakshal starts feeding Tamara misleading nonsense, Vane watches in horror and realizes she is telling her things she absolutely does not need to hear. Trying to end the chaos fast, Vane says they came to town to enroll at the academy and asks to be excused, adding that he does not have time to keep answering questions. Tamara right away says she can save him the trouble if he comes with her, and asks whether they want to enroll. Vane pauses, confused, and asks what exactly she means, while Lakshal watches Tamara warily from beside him. Tamara cheerfully reveals that she is a teacher at the Royal Academy, while Vane can only stare in puzzled disbelief. The group arrives at Siphon Royal Academy, and Vane, having heard it was connected to the Demon Emperor's castle, is struck by just how enormous it is. As they head inside, Vane reflects that the academy has many departments and that many graduates become royal officials, though he admits the enrollment process is still mostly a blur to him. Tamara happily leads them onward and greets the teachers around her, while nearby whispers make it clear the group trailing behind her has drawn attention. Vane notices Lakshal is attracting just as many looks as Tamara, and Tamara adds that it makes sense since Tamachan is one of the academy's popular students. Tamara excitedly says she is walking between the two of them and that it feels wonderful, then all of a sudden asks Vane what his goal is. Vane considers it while Tamara tosses out possible futures like becoming a knight, an adventurer, or even a sorcery researcher, and at last he says he simply wants to live freely. Vane explains that he does not want to be tied to a village job for life, so becoming an adventurer feels right, especially now that the work has grown more dangerous and the guild is flooded with requests. Tamara explains that the Royal Academy teaches everything from practical combat to research, then asks whether this academy would be enough to help him become an adventurer. Vane agrees at once, and Tamara beams as she declares that he is clearly meant for the academic path after all. Tamara explains that her family has fought demons for generations, and says she is now honing herself while raising the next generation. She declares with firm resolve that someday she will defeat the demon emperor Zerus. Tamara proudly calls that ambition her dream, while Vane quietly studies her with new interest. Vane reflects that Zerus currently has barely a fifth of her former power. But even so, he doubts Tamara, strong as she is, could defeat her yet, before she all of a sudden calls out to him. Tamara asks whether Vane obtained Zerus's Mind's Eye skill, and Vane casually confirms it as he realizes he had been meaning to test it. She explains that Mind's Eye is a passive skill that boosts accuracy and evasion while also letting him check other people's status. Vane remarks that the skill sounds useful, and Tamara adds that with it he may even be able to tell whether an enemy could become useful to Zerus. Tamara politely asks Vane to inspect her status, and he agrees without hesitation. As he starts checking her information, Vane bluntly remarks that Lakshal is quite troublesome. While examining Tamara's status screen, Vane focuses on her stats in surprise and ends up staring at the display. Vane judges Tamara to be extraordinarily strong, noting her high-level regeneration, a skill that can nullify lethal attacks at fixed times, and her overall overwhelming stats, then concludes she may already be close to Lakshal's current level and could even rival Zerus. Tamara notices Vane and Lakshal have both gone quiet and asks why they all of a sudden seem so distant. Vane brushes it aside and says it is nothing as he steps forward again with Lakshal at his side. Tamara cheerfully explains that if she fought Zerus right now, she might actually be able to defeat her, but warns that Zerus being a tamed demon is still a major problem that cannot be ignored. Vane thinks he should keep Zerus close for now because if the situation shifts, he may not be able to stop Lakshal, and he quietly admits that whatever comes next may not be dull. As they continue walking, Vane wonders if he can switch the status display to another page. He discovers that Mind's Eye can expose deeply personal status details as well, and realizes the skill reveals far more than he expected. Vane stares at Lakshal and wonders if that means he can inspect her status the same way, and she right away notices his reaction. When he checks Lakshal's detailed status, the screen confirms she is fully tamed and utterly devoted to him, leaving both of them stunned by how blunt the information is. The atmosphere turns painfully awkward as the comparison slips into very personal territory, and the two girls are reduced to an embarrassing side-by-side judgment that leaves everyone flustered. While checking Tamara's details, Vane trails off awkwardly and admits he still honestly cannot tell which of them is better. Tamara asks whether he has finished checking her status, and Vane says he will explain later while quietly noting that Mind's Eye is an incredibly convenient ability. Tamara explains that Zerus especially hated having her status checked and would always let out a heavy sigh afterward, making Vane realize Zerus must be powerful too. The group then continues through the academy building together as the conversation finally shifts. A staff member confirms that the paperwork is complete and asks Vane whether his chosen field is military studies focused on weapon combat and magic, and he says that it is. He is then told to take his student card and map and head to his assigned dorm, and he acknowledges the instructions. Noticing that he paid the full tuition up front despite the steep cost, the staff member asks if he comes from a wealthy family, and Vane explains that the money is only part of what he took from Zerus, and that his birthplace would not matter here anyway. The staff member apologizes and says there is already plenty going on, asking him not to press the matter further. The staff member then says she will take her leave, making it clear their business is finished. She apologizes that she wanted to show them around but has other duties, and Vane calmly tells her not to worry and says they will surely meet again. Tamara cheerfully says she applied to the tactics teacher course and hopes they will keep seeing each other in class, while Vane gives a brief, uncertain reply. She proudly points out that she is already a student and insists Vane treat her like a teacher, ordering him to call her Tamara-sensei. Vane hesitates, but eventually gives in and awkwardly calls her Tamara-sensei. Tamara all of a sudden flares up and blurts out that she only looks younger than him. As Vane reacts in surprise, Tamara insists she is turning 20 this year and demands that he stop being rude and teasing her, declaring that she is a fully grown lady. Even so, the mood betrays her as her appearance makes her seem much younger, leaving the contrast hanging there. Lakshal quietly watches Vane's reaction and says everything is fine, though her intense stare makes it obvious she is reading the moment closely. Lakshal then steps in and bluntly remarks that Tamara is a very cute person, catching Tamara completely off guard as the moment turns awkwardly personal. Tamara is left flustered and overwhelmed by the sudden attention. As the group moves on, Tamara loudly vows that by the next time they meet, she will have grown taller, while a dry note points out that such a dramatic change is impossible. Tamara grabs onto Vane with a bright laugh and says the nuisance is gone, then eagerly urges him to look around the academy, while he gives in and admits she is troublesome in her own way too. As they walk together, Vane calls out to Lakshal and says all the paperwork was finished thanks to Tamara, so she should not treat her like a nuisance. Lakshal all of a sudden stops and quietly asks what Vane is planning to do with that woman. She bluntly asks whether he intends to make Tamara one of his own, and when Vane denies having any plans and says it depends on Tamara herself, Lakshal warns that if he were to take her in, she too would fall under his command in that case. Vane looks baffled by the intensity of the question and tells Lakshal she is asking a great deal. Lakshal lowers herself and apologizes for being greedy, then admits she was afraid Vane's heart might be taken by someone else. She confesses that she has already given up everything and has nothing left but him, then pleads with him not to cast her aside. The moment turns emotionally intense as Lakshal throws herself against Vane, and he catches her while she clings to him in plain desperation. Looking straight at him, Lakshal warns him not to take her lightly and declares that her heart belongs to her alone. She reminds Vane that he already called her one of his own and vows that no matter what happens, she will never leave him. Lakshal, still clinging to Vane, asks him to prove himself by fully accepting her, while he dryly remarks that she really is a spoiled girl. The heavy moment is shattered when someone loudly calls out that they have finally found them. Tamara rushes over in embarrassment and apologizes, admitting she gave them the wrong map because both dorms had been marked. She quickly corrects herself and explains that the girls' dorm is actually this place marked in red. Tamara notices Lakshal's flushed face and asks what is wrong, while Lakshal struggles to regain her composure after the tense moment. Tamara cheerfully thanks Lakshal for escorting her all the way there, but Lakshal stiffly says it was only because of a mistake and tells her not to worry about it. Tamara right away starts fussing over Lakshal and praises her as a very good girl, leaving Lakshal stunned by the childish treatment. Lakshal trembles with frustration and protests that Tamara is treating her like a child again, while Tamara seems amused by the reaction. Lakshal turns away with a huff, and Vane, watching the bickering, quietly tells the two of them to just get along.